Chapter 2. A Mother's Goodbye. The following morning, Illorn intruded Emilay's home without so much as a knock. He found his fat friend lying on the floor, sleeping on a linen mat, and snoring so loudly it was a wonder how anyone else could get their share of rest. Illorn shook his shoulders, whispering, "Emilay, wake up, Emilay." It wasn't enough to wake him up. Nevertheless, Illorn gathered his courage and took his friend's pillow out from under his head, letting him hit the floor with a heavy thud that shook the wall's mounted shields. Emilay shot up in terror, screaming, but Illorn was quick to cover his mouth. "Silence! It's only I, you fool!" Emilay calmed himself and removed Illorn's hand from his face. "What do you hear?" Emilay shouted. Illorn flinched and waited until hearing his friend's father resume his snoring. He relaxed and sighed. "I need to speak with you about the war." "What?" Emilay asked. His eyes darted to and fro. "What?" he asked again, this time whispering. "Illorn, I'm hungry. I have not the time for such foolishness." "I told my father that you agreed to fight nature with me." "You what?" asked Emilay, forgetting to whisper. He no longer seemed so tired. "You need to tell him that you did, or else I will be in trouble. Please." "Good. You deserve to be in trouble. I mean, how dare you? I thought I told you no." Emilay's buck teeth seemed to be sticking out farther than usual this day. Queer enough, the green bit of food was still stuck between his teeth. Some said it had been there for years, and that no one had bothered to tell him. "But, Emilay, you don't understand. My father, he is going to be greatly displeased if—" "I don't care," said Emilay. The rooster outdoors flapped its wings and sung to the rising sun. "I already told you I don't want to fight, and that's it. I'd rather be here making bread than doing whatever it is you want me to do." Illorn felt his heart sink. Truly, he wished to undergo great adventures and become a legendary explorer. But what good would that be without the company of his best friend? Even so, he took a step back and apologized. "Will father allow a man with no word to fight?" thought Illorn, and then he left. Walking homewards, he heard Emilay's door slam. It was hopeless, though he then stumbled upon his own bow lying in the dirt. He used it so many times as a child that he felt heartbroken to see it half buried in the loose sand. His mother had crafted it herself, and too did she spin the wool and create its string. Regardless, it was lousy and had far less use than any bow built by a true craftsman. But with this sudden flash of ire, his face reddened, and he snapped it in twain over his knee and cast it back upon the earth with little love. "Weak friend have I," muttered the son of Giborn. "A fool I am to wish a party with the lamest of all people." Until noon he sat in wrath, shooting his bow with great enmity for his friend. Part of him felt that his father's anger would be subsided if he was seen practicing, but ever so Giborn was sure to be aware of his son's false troth by then. After all 11 arrows had been shot, he approached the same tree and retrieved them, but he continued to look farther into the woods. "I am a man grown. I can fare whithersoever pleases me." With that thought, he took a step into the bower of leaves and again saw a spider before him. It was bigger than the first one he saw, but not so much so, and consumed with feelings of betrayal, he knocked his bow and smote it, sending his arrow through its 8-legged body. It did no more than squirm. Its life was over ere anyone knew its name. Illorn took the arrow from the white and again readied his bow. faring farther forth through the woods. In short time he found himself in places he knew not, nor recognized for that matter. He crossed the hither end of a small stream he never knew, and came to a place inhabited by many large boulders. He wondered if Fifnir had ever been there. Perhaps he had, perhaps not. But around one large stone he found blood, and the young of a doe. But accompanied with the babes was a mother, wounded, and incapable of arising. Illorn smiled and aimed at its forehead, but then noticed its hurt, for what had injured it was Illorn's missing arrow. The dear mother moaned, aware of her impending doom, as Illorn relaxed his bow. It seemed to him that the world around him changed. The doe bobbed its head. She knew that wolves would find not only her, but also her children. In that moment, Illorn felt his tears run down his face. He thought of his own mother, for he was abandoning her to a forlorn life. Never afore had he wished so much to be in her presence. Wiping his eyes, he approached the deer and felt his arrow. It had landed deep within her, though it struck nothing fatal. He tugged it, attempting to assist her, but only caused it more pain. It was hopeless, and therefore he left the arrow where it was. As the day westerned, he returned homewards, now knowing of mortality and why we fear it. But nay, he learned that he feared not for his own life, but for others. And this, he knew, was what his mother felt. This, he thought, was why she forbade him from battle. Illorn thought to himself, I am the fawn, and my mother still wishes to care for me. Truly a selfish being I am. However so, too, thought he, but nay, fawn I am not. I am a man grown. I am not defenseless or weak, and so forth I shall strive. As the 3 moons arose into the heavens, he counted the stars. The ether had grown far too dark for any wise to be without, for that was when monstrous and fell-hungry wights hunted game. As he traveled onward, he heard, Help me! Let me go! And therefore he ran to the voice's aid, for he recognized it well. And anon, around a building, he found Emilay on the ground, being kicked in his side by 3 large girls. Please stop, shouted Emilay. He shielded his face in vain as they continued to kick his belly. It jiggled as they did. The fair, who had been doing the kicking, spoke up and spouted mockeries of Emilay's name. She said, Too weak to fight back, churl. Stop, shouted Illorn. The 3 turned to him and gan to approach him ere Illorn drew his bow. Stop, I say! He drew the bowstring to his ear. One careless move from either of them and they would be smitten, and he in bonds. But in such times he thought naught of such rationality. The girl betwixt the 2 laughed. Have you not the courage to use that, little Illorn? She then approached him, and Illorn let loose his arrow. It struck in the earth before her. She raised an eyebrow, but then sprinted towards him. Illorn had not the time to draw a second arrow, and was therefore struck across the jaw, and fell into a helpless swoon. Illorn awoke, hearing the voice of Emilay. He's waking up, said his friend. Illorn could feel him patting his cheeks. It was day, and the song of bird welcomed his waking. Is my bow okay? Asked Illorn. He could see Emilay smiling. Your bow is fine, friend. Illorn quickly got up, making himself dizzy. He was in his home, and therefore saw his father in front of him, though not his mother. He then felt his skin grow pale as he remembered the lie he had told his father the day before. Giborn sauntered, again with his hands behind his back. He said unto his son, "First you fare into the woods until twilight, and then you create hostility with Iltha. She was attacking him." "Silence," his father roared. "Fie, Illorn, I thought you knew better." Illorn looked down on himself. The disappointment of his father always scared all other thoughts into hiding. "But," continued Giborn, "because you were true to your word and convinced your friend to join the fight, I will not punish you." "What?" shouted Illorn. He looked at Emilay, who smiled with his 2 front teeth jutting past his bottom lip. Quoth he, "I have grown tired of being weak, Illorn. Your defending me inspired me to fight, and therefore I wish to fight." Thereupon Illorn looked back into the eyes of his father with great confusion, then back at Emilay. "On normal circumstances, we would leave for Hoosshire in a fortnight from now, but because it is a great distance away and you two are new, we leave on the morrow. Expect to spend the remainder of the day preparing." Illorn's face was never brighter. He spent the rest of his day packing his best wools and putting on his finest boots. But it was later when Giborn summoned his son into his office to present him with a sword and a shield. He said, "Son, I know well of your love for the bow and arrow, but pray hearken to me. Our enemies are swift, and they may be small, no matter your skill. You will not slay them with bow alone." And Illorn responded, "Nay, father, I am not a shields man. I have practiced day and long, and you have practiced day and long on the trunk of a tree, a being that does not move or evade, let alone flutter at your face and attempt to tear your eyes from your head." Illorn's eyes widened. It had been his life's dream to become the greatest bowman in all of Moor. He was not so quick to abandon his dreams. "If you think weak of my skill, then why did you bestow upon me the last bow of Oadmere?" asked Illorn. Giborn shook his head, for the wisdom of his son had grown little due to his constant absence. "Son, I have many things yet to teach and many secrets yet to tell you, but perhaps you have yet to hear me clearly. It is our duty to slay the owls of Satham. So I swear it, no bow will defend you when their sum is great, and their distance is nigh to your skull. So learn fast, and take this shield and sword. It was my father's, and his father's father's, but now it is yours." Illorn took the sword and shield. They were far heavier than they had looked, though the burden was not too great on his shoulders. His father smiled and chuckled. It had been many days since he had first dreamed of his son bearing the great heirlooms of his fathers. "There, you look like a true warrior, my son. In your hand, you bear with you a sword named Eldorn and a shield named Alderall. Together they have yet to let down a single man, and I trust that they will prove you well." In truth, Eldorn was blunt and old. Its grip needed to be replaced, and its blade needed to be sharpened. The grip of the shield was loose and ready to give way, which caused it to feel awkward in his hands. However, though the prized weapons of his blood were with dints and chips, he loved them as he loved his father, and thanked him. As Illorn left towards his home, he watched the sun drift beneath the horizon and thus welcomed darkness. His mother was nowhere to be seen, which was rather queer, but remembering that he was to be awaking sooner than his accustomed time, he went to bed early. When he had awoken, he equipped himself of all his accoutrements and bags, and took a bite from a loaf of bread he found lying aside him where he rested. He advanced, but stopped suddenly to the apparition of a figure. It was his mother. Alara was clad only by her dress, and her hair was a mess. Her eyes were red and stained by dried tears. She rubbed her nose, and her son approached. Mother, said Illorn, what do you awake at this hour? Alara said nothing, but only stared. I see that you have awoken early, son. Perhaps you would like me to prepare you a meal ere you go to chop wood with Mother. You know well that I have not woken this early to prepare for winter. Illorn could again feel the emptiness in his heart. Oh, I see, said Alara. She looked down at her fingers and began to pick at her nails. But perhaps you would like to stay and eat? No, Mother. Father expects me soon. The image of the doe came back to his mind. He wondered if the fawns were okay, but they were probably eaten by then. He slowly walked towards the door. Wait, Alara called. A tear ran from her eye. Are you even going to say goodbye to your own mother? A second escaped her. Illorn turned to her. His heart was thudding. Too, a tear ran down his cheek. As he reached for the door, Alara shot up and ran in front of him, blocking him from the exit. You shan't go. I told you. I forbid it. She bit her bottom lip. But, Mother, you know of your brother Illorn? The tears that fled from her trailed down her cheeks and onto her neck. All the while, Illorn's entire body went numb. He was never aware of a brother he once had. But brother, he stammered. Mother, don't be a fool, please. He was 6 years of age, my son, and he chose to follow thy sick father, and she fell to her knees, covering her eyes. His name was Giborn, though I called him Illborn for his fate. I tried to forget him by giving thee his name, but, Mother, but damn it, I can't. Every waking moment I see him in thine eyes. Illorn stood thence, motionless. He could not dare to hug his mother. However, so he desired. For so he turned to where she was sitting. There he saw his bow of old, repaired with dried sinew and leather. The string, too, was new and replaced with something more apt. He felt the grip of the bow become wet as he faced his mother. My bow, muttered Illorn. I found it, but I thought you would still desire use of it because you loved it so when you were a child. Mother, I am no longer a child, I know, but you are forever my son, and no matter what, I will always be watching you. Illorn could hardly look down upon her. He approached the door, opening it ajar and stepping past his mother. Please, my son, said she, looking up at him. Illorn gave her one last look before stepping outside and letting the door close behind him.